You're listening to WPVM LP Asheville 103.7, globally at WPVMFM.org. And this is the Home Business Success Show. Greetings and welcome to the Home Business Success Show. I'm your host, Hank Eder, also known as Hank the PR Guy. Folks who run home businesses have some great advantages over brick and mortar businesses. They also face unique challenges. As we speak with home business entrepreneurs on the show each week, we'll gain valuable insights on how to balance business and life and to share best practices for people who run home businesses. Here at WPVM LP Asheville, we'd like to take this opportunity to remind you that your WPVM is Asheville's original community radio station, the one that wakes you up in the morning and offers lively, thoughtful companionship on the weekend. Of course, this idea of being your radio station only goes so far. You don't have to see the bills. Our hosts are volunteers, but our rent, utilities, license fees, and technical support requirements are not. At WPVM, we are serious about keeping our overhead low. If you owned this station, you'd find the monthly overhead bills in your mailbox. The beauty of WPVM is that you get all of the benefits of that investment, and all you have to pay is what you see fit. Your help, along with that from your friends and neighbors, adds up to what we need to make WPVM a great radio station. Support your radio station now with a gift at 828-367-7103 or go to our website at WPVMFM.org and choose the donate option you prefer. Thank you for joining your community to help WPVM LP. Our first guest, Louis Martinée, is a producer, songwriter, and disc jockey in the Miami, Florida area. Martinée reached #1 on the Billboard pop charts as writer and producer of the song Seasons Change by the girl group Exposé and has had multiple records reach top 10. Louis received Billboard Songwriter of the Year as well as BMI Songwriter of the Year. In addition to founding Exposé in 1984, he also wrote and produced all the songs on the first two albums, Exposure in 1987 and What You Don't Know in 1989. He also contributed to the group's third effort, Exposé, in 1992. Louis has also worked with many other artists of note, producing, writing, and/or remixing tracks, including Ricky Martin, Dead or Alive, Enrique Iglesias, Celine Dion, Company B, Arika Kane, Jermaine Jackson, Sequel, The Cover Girls, Debbie Gibson, Vanessa Williams, Pet Shop Boys, Sun by Four, and Elvis Crespo, among others. You get the idea. His contributions to the nascent freestyle music movement in the mid-1980s contributed to its popularity, which continues to this day. DJ Martinée has been doing dance music radio show programmed all over the world with top ratings. Welcome to the show, Louis.
Hey, welcome. Thank you for having me. Also, you forgot to say that we're very good friends.
Oh, yes.
We've known each other for a while now.
I would say a while. We go back into the 80s ourselves. In fact, before you did all those things with Exposé, we were already working together, which was one of the best times in my life.
Me too. But that's why we're still friends. You know, we keep in touch, and you know, I value you and your wife's friendship very much.
Well, that's wonderful to know, and I wish that we lived closer so that we'd see each other instead of just on Zoom. But tell us about what you've been up to. We've heard what you've done before. What have you been up to in these last few years?
Well, I've been doing some acts that are new, trying to launch them. I always try to keep new artists, coming, helping them along, things like that. Also, I work with artists that have been around too. Like I just finished working with Gladys Knight. She doesn't have the pips anymore.
Mm-hmm. So she's
and
she's pipless.
She's pipless.
There you go.
Yeah. Also with one of the singers from Tavares, Butch, and also one of the singers from Surface, a group Surface that had a big R&B hits. They have a song that's actually played in all the weddings, and that's Bernard. So a lot of artists that I've been working with that come from back in the day. But I also try to develop new artists too, new groups, new bands, things like that.
Is there anybody we should be watching for in the near future that might be up and coming?
Well, not yet, because we're going to release. The first thing I'm going to release in the next year, we kind of holding off a little bit because of the pandemic, but we actually did a song about the pandemic, about being positive, and then that's going to have a bunch of different acts where we have, like I said, some of the acts that I mentioned, some rock acts too on it. Can't say the names right now, but because we're still working on getting those. But so that looks like it's going to be pretty good. We're going to release that now, and then we're going to wait for the new artists till after the pandemic.
Okay, well, that looks like something to look forward to. Speaking of the pandemic, how has 2020 affected what you do?
Well, my I DJ. I've always DJ'd, and that affected it obviously a lot because the bars and casinos and all those things and venues are all closed for a long time. So, but the working in the studio that I kept doing because it's in my house. So I have a studio in my house that I work out of, and that's been, pretty much what I do. It keeps my sanity.
For those of you who are seeing this on the video, that's part of your studio that we're seeing in the background.
Yes.
Well, you just mentioned how the venues are closed, and independent music venues have really taken a hit in 2020. Some probably won't even reopen. Do you think live music will be able to stage a comeback as these restrictions are lifted?
Yeah, I think slowly. People are, waiting to get out, and so some people are going to stay home because they're still maybe a little scared, and that's fine. But I think people are really, really anxious to get out and get on with their lives and going back to normal. I think that slowly it'll come back. Whenever they have a concert now, they're going to do a lot of spacing, so you won't be able to get full capacity. So it won't be as good as it used to be, but hopefully it will soon.
Yeah, eventually that'll all fade and go away and things will get back to normal. And we're hoping that many of the venues that do live music will weather the storm and still be financially solvent when this ends. Like here in Asheville, North Carolina, there's dozens and dozens of independent music venues. It's amazing what a music city Asheville actually is. But with some of these places closed for so long, you can imagine that financially they're suffering. Going to the next thing I'd like to ask you about, you were there for a very exciting time in the music business, and you made quite a name for yourself as a writer and producer. Things are very different today in the music business. Could you give us a few examples of how it's changed for people who dream of becoming producers and musicians?
Well, it's actually become easier, but then again harder because it's easier for you to record music in your home, with just a laptop and an interface and a keyboard or a guitar or something. You can make music and sounds really great. Where before, if you didn't go to a studio and spend $250 an hour, and a song could take as many as 80 hours to record, only a select few could record songs at the time. So that's changed in the way of being able to produce music and record music. It's easier, but then the problem is that there's so many people doing it that it kind of becomes like too full, and it's hard to, you know, rise to the top. So I mean, you can you have to do a lot of promoting, and you have to have a lot of following. Really, the best way to get, you know, stardom is to create a lot of following. When you have a lot of following, then, you know, then you're halfway there. If your song is good, then you're all the way there.
Yeah, well,
and then a label will pick you up. Before the label, to make a comparison, before the label would sign you and develop you. Now you develop yourself, and then they sign you.
I see. So then the labels are looking for somebody who already has a big following and the ability to do all their recording and come out sounding really well. So I think we'll talk about a little bit more of that. As you just mentioned, today everyone can have a home music studio and make music if they have some skill and ability. You know, I've noticed that there are a lot of people who think they're going to have great music just because they have the gear, but they still have to have musical ability. I mean, there's ways that they can fake certain things, but if you have it, you have it. And if you don't have it, you don't have it. But what kind of tools are people using to create music at home?
Well, I use Pro Tools. That's the one I like, but there's also other systems like Fruity Loops. I forget the names of or Ableton. Yeah, there's a bunch of different programs that you can buy. The studio standards Pro Tools, that one's the one that a lot of studios use. So if you want to do something that later on, maybe you want to record the vocals in a nice professional room with a, you know, $5,000 or $10,000 microphone, you can take your session there. Otherwise, you can just take a stereo mix instrumental, and then they'll put it in their system, and then you can record over that. So there's ways around it. But, you know, the studio standard is Pro Tools. So that's the one I use. I've used it for a long time.
Right. But if you bring them a, say, a WAV file, and I don't want to get too technical for our audience, but if you bring them a digital audio file from whatever it was you used, you know, maybe you used the system that people use on Apple, which is, it's
GarageBand.
Well, not GarageBand. I mean, people do use GarageBand. Oh, Logic.
Logic, yeah.
Yeah, the more professionals are using Logic. So you could take that file from Logic and make it an audio file that you could bring into that studio. And even if they're working with the one that you mentioned, Pro Tools, yeah, then they should be able to have the compatibility, correct?
Yeah, they'll just input it into whatever, you know, system they're using, and then you can just record over it. Then you take it back as a WAV file to your studio and put it back into your system. So you can, you know, go from platform to platform without any problem.
Very good. So it's becoming more universal in that you don't need to get too tied up in, is the technology I'm using the one that the studio might be using if I want to do a vocal mix? You just bring what you've got and they'll work it out. Yeah,
and there's also providers of internet systems where you can actually be in your house and the engineer can be in the studio and you can listen to the mix, and at the same time that he's working on it, you can tell him, oh, you know, give me a little bit more vocals, drop the bass a little bit, and things like that. So there's systems that you can actually work recording a guitar, mixing, doing drums, and be at the same time, but in different places in the world.
Very cool. Maybe you can give us this. This is a question I hadn't planned, but I bet you understand this, and I think our listeners would be interested in it. I recently looked at a video, an online video of Blue Oyster Cult doing Godzilla, but they were all in different places in the world, and they were all, you know, in their own pandemic isolated rooms. And yet, man, were they good together? How do they sync all that? How do they keep it all together?
Yeah, that's that system. There's several people that provide that, companies on the internet, and basically it's almost like a Zoom call. Everybody logs in and you know, and you record that way. It's pretty cool. And like I said, it's been around for a while now, but it's really gotten popular because of the pandemic. So it's really being used a lot now.
I see. So if somebody was interested in finding out what that was, they could just go online and do a search for.
And there's several different ones.
Well, I think I've asked you about your own home studio. In addition to Pro Tools, what other things are you using that maybe would be helpful to some of our musical listeners?
I use WaveLab to do mastering. You can master in Pro Tools too, but WaveLab is made mostly for mastering, so I use that for mastering. And mastering, for people that don't know, is once you do a mix of all the instruments and vocals and everything, you get what's called a final mix. Then you master it, kind of gives it that final tweaking. And mostly it makes it loud because everything on the radio they want loud. So it mostly makes it loud. And like I said, you can add a little bass, a little high, whatever you want to do. Take away something, and that's the final master. It's called.
Right. And then other things that people might want to use in their studios, I guess, would depend on what their particular discipline is. You know, if they're a guitar player, they have their guitar and ways that they record that digitally. If they're keyboard players, they have whatever it is that they do. But any other little tips or tricks that would make things better for them that you can think of?
Yeah, a good mic compressor and a good mic is going to make the guitar or drums. Drums you would need about 12 mics, but a guitar, voice, a good mic will make it sound really good, and then a good compressor. I prefer a tube compressor because it gives everything that I record through it a little warmth that digital recording doesn't provide. So I like to add a little what's called warmth in the recordings so that the overall mix sounds a little warmer. I don't know how else to explain it.
Mhm. Yeah, I get that, but I guess that people who want to know more about that can get online and they can research things like that. And there's some pretty big online music stores like Sweetwater Sound and people that can give them some insight into what's available. And of course, there's things that you would use as a pro that maybe are higher end than some of the home studio people might get, in the prosumer market. But
Yeah.
I think that there's a caveat, a warning here, in that if you are looking to break into the music business, like we talked about earlier, where you develop your leads, you get your following and you do your mix and you then get a label to sign you. I guess you need the better gear to sound the best that you could possibly be.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And then one thing that I also suggest is that if you want to buy something, YouTube has a lot of people talking about anything you can think of. I mean, most obscure microphones and compressors and things, and then you could do a little research. There's always somebody on YouTube that's going to tell you a little about it, and also give you tips on how to mix. There's all kinds of things on YouTube that are great that I myself use at times. So.
I've looked at that for various things that, my wife is a musician. In fact, when you see the video of the show, the music that you'll hear will be her music at the beginning. Uh, so yeah, we've looked at YouTube for any number of things, and that's great advice because anything you ever want to know on any subject is on YouTube these days. You're
Yep.
listening. You're listening to WPVM LP Asheville 103.7 globally at WPVMFM.org. And this is the Home Business Success Show. I'm your host, Hank Eater. My guest in this segment is award-winning music producer and writer, Louis Martinée. Hey, Louis, let's say a young artist has the chops and the home studio to start producing some quality music. What are some of the ways they can get their music out there?
Well, YouTube and Spotify, and there's other services like iTunes and things like that you can start out. First of all, you've got to have a following, or else you're not going to sell anything. And then when you have a following, you sell some product. Then, like I've mentioned before, a label will more than likely contact you because they want to, sign you to their label and represent you.
What are some of the best ways to get a following?
Basically putting on a lot of videos, a lot of quick little videos, Instagram, all the social media sites, just constantly putting things on and following people that have a lot of following. and then hopefully those people will follow you. You know, there's a lot of little tricks and things that you can also look online and get tips on YouTube and Google. But basically what you need to do is get a large following. That's the main thing you got to do.
Yeah, so then what we talked about a few minutes ago about looking things on YouTube, you could even go onto YouTube and look up things about how to build a following.
Yep, that's it.
It's all there. Somebody once said to me, you know, you and I are from another generation of than what's happening out there, but you've been at the core of it and you've seen all the changes. But somebody once said to me, if you want to know about things like that, about going viral and all those kind of things, find a young person, find somebody who's 20 something and ask them what's the latest. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, that's definitely a must. That's why I'm always looking for new artists that I can, you know, kind of get the new vibes and the new things that are going, you know, with the new artists. So that's why I like to, you know, work with new artists. At the same time as I like to work with, you know, legendary artists too, because they have a lot of experience that I can learn, and then the new artists will have new ideas that I could, you know, also learn. So you're never done learning.
That's a very wise thing, because those who think they are done learning have shut a door in which they can, by shutting that door, they're going to miss out on a lot of really good opportunities. I think that wisdom comes from when some of us say, okay, maybe I don't know as much as I thought I did, and I'm willing to learn more, and I'm willing to listen. I think that's where wisdom starts.
That's it.
Yes.
Got it.
So you mentioned that some of the venues that people can use to sell their music in today's marketplace. You mentioned Spotify, you mentioned iTunes. You also mentioned the all-important caveat that if you don't have a following, just because you put it out there, it doesn't mean anybody's going to buy it. But at the same time, can just anyone who has produced a song, if it's a pretty good song, they can contact iTunes and just get it on there? Or do you have to have...
No, you have to go through, there's like CD Baby, and there's other companies that you can put your music on there, and they charge you a small fee. And then they'll, in turn, put it on all the, like Spotify, iTunes, and things like that.
I see. Yes, I've heard about CD Baby before. And I've heard it's actually a pretty good place for people to start. Would you say that it is?
Yeah, definitely. And there's other ones. So you can do your research. There's other ones like it. But like I said, you can put it out there. If nobody knows about it, they ain't going to buy it. So you have to have a following. You got to create a following. Another thing you can do is do your little videos with your Android or iPhone, do some videos, and you know, and you can get a cheap little editor for like $50 and put it in your computer, and then do some edits and put it on YouTube, and then create following that way too, you know, along with Instagram and Facebook and, you know, all the social media sites.
Well, you know, the young people are accustomed to getting all their music free online, and I think that's been something that's really hurt the music business over time. But what are some of the ways that artists can monetize their music? I've heard about people who put free stuff out there, and then they have other stuff that isn't free, that once the people really like the free stuff, they're more likely to buy the for sale stuff. Is there some wisdom in that?
Yeah, no, a lot of people do that. I myself do that too. I put free things out there, and then that way they can hear that new act, and then they can buy the rest of the songs. It's more of a song market now than a CD or album, as we used to call it. You know, a lot of songs, they'll pick and choose which ones they want. So, you know, you do one so that they can hopefully like it, and then they'll go ahead and buy a few more.
So in other words, if you've just come up with what we used to call an album, and you have, say, 9 or 11 songs on that album, you might pick out whichever one you think is either the best or the most likely to be commercially successful and put it out there free. So that, and then they'll say, hey, I like that. Maybe I can get some more. But then those are for sale.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me. Is there some advice you would give to young artists who are just starting out in the music business?
The best thing you could do is perform somewhere, you know, even for free, obviously, when nobody knows who you are. Because really, if you can't perform makes no sense to put music out there because, eventually that's what's really going to get you to stardom is performance. So I suggest doing live performances as much as you can, and basically get a following. That's really the biggest thing.
So doing the performances is because if a label does decide they want to sign you, they're going to want to put you on tour, right? And they're going to
Yeah,
want to know that you have the juice, so to speak, to do that kind of a performance, that you're not just going to be standing there like a zombie and not exciting anybody in concert, right?
exactly. Yes, that's exactly it. Before they even sign you, they'll want to see you do a private performance like that, and then, or they might tell you, set up a small concert or a show, and we can come see you.
Okay. Or do you think they're doing any of that on Zoom these days, where the band could do a Zoom performance for a label?
Yeah, now they have to do it that way until this thing is over.
I see. So
Yeah,
maybe that'll stick because, one of the things that I cover on this show, the Home Business Success Show, is that a lot of people started working at home because of the pandemic. And a lot of people actually lost their jobs and then started home businesses because of the pandemic.
yeah,
But among a lot of people who, if given the opportunity to go back, a lot of people are saying they would rather continue working from home if their boss would allow them to do that. So maybe in the music business, some of that will stick too, that Zoom is going
yeah.
to be bigger than it was before.
Absolutely. Yeah, this gave it a whole new life.
Okay. And is there anything else I haven't mentioned that you might like to tell our listeners about the music business, or, roads to success, or anything at all that you'd like to share?
Um, Basically, widen your taste of music. Some people just like hip hop and they don't want to hear anything else. Some people just like rock. They don't want to hear anything else. Some people just like, you know, R&B. And then, my thing, what I would suggest, especially if you want to produce, which is what I do mostly, is produce and write. I pretty much like all kinds of music, I've always wanted to advance my skills, like in producing things that I don't normally produce, and that's what I suggest, is that widen your horizon as far as taste.
That's some good advice. Just broaden your chops and broaden your horizons.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Where can our listeners connect with you online?
Um, I guess like Spotify and YouTube, you can search me out on iTunes. Some of the songs that I put out there are by artists, so they were not going to have my name. So the ones that have my name are going to be some. So I have a web page, but I haven't worked on it in so long, since social media became strong. But I should probably, revamp my webpage to tell people where to go. So I'll forward you to that someday.
Do you have an email address that if people want to send you an email, they can do that?
Yeah, it's LMartinee@AOL.com. An oldie but goodie.
AOL.com, that's still around. Louis, I thank you so much for coming on the show today, and it's such a joy to see you. You're listening to WPVM LP Asheville 103.7, globally at WPVMFM.org. And this is the Home Business Success Show. I'm your host, Hank Eater. Are you enjoying this and other fine shows on WPVM? If you are, I'd like to share a few thoughts with you. There are things in your life that just don't change, even in the time of COVID-19, like needing a cup of coffee to start the day, listening to national news at 8 a.m., or an informative science or talk show while you're running errands, enjoying afternoons filled with WPVM's local music, or keeping up with theater and concert news, listening to uplifting stories about small businesses and nonprofits that support our community, or doing your weekend chores accompanied by superb, locally produced music programs. In presenting these features to the community, we tell the stories of local artists, nonprofits, and small businesses at no cost to them. In the morning or on your way home at 2 a.m. or over the weekend, WPVM is here for you. It's radio you rely on, and it's only possible with your support. Giving takes just 2 minutes of your time. Your gift, no matter how small, helps WPVM bring you the news, music, and stories you rely on. The benefits will be here for you every day in the form of local programming that reflects the authentic culture of Asheville. Use the links found on WPVMFM.org to make a single or recurring contribution, or send your gift to WPVM at 34 Wall Street, number 407, Asheville, North Carolina, 28801. Thank you for appreciating WPVM LP. My next guest is Blaine Greenfield, who also happens to be the host of the Blaine's World radio show. Blaine is a professor emeritus of marketing at Bucks County Community College, and he has written 2 books, 2 joke books. He is an active volunteer in community organizations, including the Attic Salt Theater Company, Asheville SCORE, AB Tech Small Business Center, and Mountain Mediation Services. And he is on the National Advisory Board for the Dementia Society of America. He serves on the board of directors for the radio station WPVM, this very one, where he also hosts a weekly radio Facebook Live show. In addition, he has appeared in 3 shows and 2 movies, and he publishes Blaine's World, an amusing and informative blog that can be obtained by writing him at bginbc@aol.com. Blaine lives in Fairview, North Carolina with his beautiful bride, Cynthia, and their cat, Lovey. Welcome to the show, Blaine.
Thank you for having me, Hank. It's a pleasure.
It's a pleasure having you here. Well, this is going to be a fun topic, I think. I understand you're not a big fan of the golden rule. I mean, everybody's heard of the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you. Why are you not a fan of the golden rule?
Let me start off by asking you, Hank, a question. And that is, you've heard of the golden rule, and I assume, do you typically try to follow it?
Oh, I've tried most of my life to try to follow it because it's a good guideline.
Okay. And I used to think it was until my daughter got older. And I think I first saw this, Hank, with my daughter, who I love dearly, but she's sometimes a pain in my butt. And if I want to communicate with her, I would call her up. She'd never return my phone calls. I would send her an email. She wouldn't return my emails. No matter what I did, I couldn't get her to get back to me until I read this book called The Platinum Rule by a guy by the name of Tony Alessandra. And he said, in essence, Hank, what I was doing was all wrong. I was trying to communicate with my daughter the way I wanted to communicate. But a much better approach is what I call the Platinum Rule. And the Platinum Rule says, rather than communicate with somebody the way you want to communicate with them, find out how they want to be communicated with and communicate with them that way. So in the case of my daughter, so I was trying all these ways to communicate with her, and she wasn't responding until I finally said to myself, Self, there's a better way to do this. And the better way to do this, Hank, was to text her because she loves texting. And when I started texting her, I would get a response within 2 minutes, okay? And so it finally hit me, and I want to share this with you and your listeners, that in terms of business, there's a better way to communicate with people. And you know, I've talked about this also off the air. Don't communicate with the way you think you want to be communicated with. The better approach is just ask them, how do you want me to communicate with you? And whatever they say, bingo, that's how you communicate with them. And that's the Platinum Rule.
And I would suppose that would mean if you're communicating with a group, and groups, have a number of members and they all might have different preferences. I suppose whenever it's possible, if somebody really has a strong preference, communicate with them separate from the rest of the group with that preference.
Boy, this sounds similar to a discussion you and I had. Okay, and let's talk about that. It's a great question, Hank. So in terms of reaching a group, let's say you have a group of 10, you have a group of 50, you have a group of 100. It's not possible conceivably to reach all 100 people each way they want to be communicated with. But what you could do, and what I encourage people to do, is ask them as a group, what's the best way you want us to communicate with you? And let's say they say email, or we're going to use email. Then you go further and ask them, when's the best time to reach you? And you give them a couple of choices. And so if you have a group of, say, 100, we'll keep the number simple. And if 70% of them say one way, well, that's the way should work for the most part, the way they want to be communicated with. And your question, good one, for the other 30, maybe I would have a text chain or something like that, or maybe I'd come up with a backup way, or maybe I'd ask for a volunteer to handle the communication with the other 30 people or something. But the point I'm trying to make, and I have talked about this, is that especially if you run a home-based business, as an example, and you have all sorts of different clients throughout the country, the first thing you should ask them immediately after you meet them is say, hey, Hank, how do you want me to reach you? And if Hank says, if you say phone, I'll call you. If you say text, I'll text you. If you say send me a snail mail, I'll write you a letter. Whatever you tell me, it's fine with me. You're my client. I'll do whatever I can to make it easy for you to reach me.
Very good. Well, that's the platinum rule in action then.
And I think that's the key. Almost, if we have, and I like doing a previous show, you have a takeaway item. And if that's the one takeaway item that folks get from today's show, it's the idea that when they communicate with their clients, especially for the first time, just ask them, how do you want me to reach you?
It makes sense. And sometimes logic escapes us more than anything else.
Okay, or sometimes we want to do what's easy for us, and we're at home and just kind of operating in a vacuum. We have to remember, especially home-based businesses, there are people throughout the country, all different time zones, all different interests. And in case of the beauty of your show, I think, and what you're working with people on, is the idea that how can you set up your business so you accommodate these clients, if you will, from all around the country, if not the world, and everybody's a little bit different. And that's a really good example, isn't it, with respect to time zones, that because you have your clients, some could be in California, some could be in Europe, some could be elsewhere. You just don't communicate with them when you want to communicate with them. You got to find out what's best for them, even if it means you setting an alarm at 2 o'clock in the morning and getting up to reach your client.
I would think that would have to be a really good client, and you'd have to be pretty dedicated to do that, but it is a good way to win the heart of that client, I'm sure.
Well, let's talk about what you just said, Hank, and I think you're on target in terms of talking about a really good client. I contend that all your clients are really good clients, and I contend, and you've heard me say this, I think, that when you market to your clients, marketing is high touch, not necessarily high tech. So we have all these high-tech means at our disposal, and you're as good as anybody I've seen at using a lot of these techniques. But the beauty of what we can do running a home business is giving people the feeling that we're communicating with them, just them, and we're just speaking to you right now, and I don't care about anybody else. All I care about is you. And if I can personalize that, we'll talk about some ways to do that, the more I can do that, I think the better we're going to have in terms of reaching your clients.
Okay. Where did you first hear about this platinum rule?
Well, I'd like to take credit for it, but as I mentioned earlier, I think the book I must have read like 20 years ago, Hank, and it was a book by this guy named Tony Alessandra. I think it's Alassandra, and he wrote it. It was a book called The Platinum Rule. I remember reading it. It didn't make much of an impact, Hank. It's one of these things I just put aside, and I didn't look at it for 10 years. It's just, I never paid attention to it. And part of the reason was the book is kind of good, but it's not specific to a lot of what I do, consulting and working one-on-one and working with home businesses. And so it didn't have much application to me until I took the rule and said, hey, I can use that in any situation whether it's a small business, a large business, whether it's a home business, whether you work in a firm. And it's not really, Hank, what's interesting, I try to use this rule, not only in my business dealings, but I try to use it in my life. You know, whatever I do, I'll ask people, you know, what do you want? And I'll try to drive what I do in life with what the person wants as opposed to what I want.
Okay. Well, when did you first start using the platinum rule? Other than the story about your daughter, when did you start using it in a broader sense?
Well, I guess I kind of tell the example. I'm sorry I can't show it to you now, but I kind of use the example, Hank, of giveaways I used to use. Okay, and I used to use a giveaway, a pen. You know, a lot of people give away pens with the advertising imprint on them. You know, and you want them to remember your firm. I used to give away pens, but the problem, Hank, with pens was that they can sometimes get expensive. So I would go the route to save money. I would get the cheapest pens possible. I thought it was a great idea. I'd get lots, 1,000 pens at a time, get really cheap pens. But the only problem was you buy a cheap pen and they tend to leak, you know, and only maybe about 1 out of 100 leak. But if you got a pen from me and you put it in your pocket and it leaked, you wouldn't be a happy camper, you know. So I came to the realization that maybe I could do that a little bit differently. So instead of pens, I started giving away, and I'll see if I can show you one. I don't have it handy, but I started giving away pencils because pencils are a lot cheaper than pens, you know. And rather than just give away pencils, I would ask people, "Do you want a pencil?" And they'd say maybe. But instead, Hank, I came up with what I thought was kind of clever, and you've seen this as well. I started giving out left and right-handed pencils. Okay, and so it wasn't that expensive. But I thought what it did, it made me unique or different than anybody else. You know, I'm the only guy you ever met who gave you a left and right-handed pencil. I'm gonna put you on the spot. Do you remember the difference?
Yes, the difference was that if it was a right-handed pencil and you were holding it with your right hand, you could read the message on it. And if it was a left-handed pencil, you'd have to hold it with the left hand to be able to read the message on it without it being backwards.
Good. I'll try to see if I can show it to you. I don't think you can see it real well. But in essence, if any of your listeners, Hank, or viewers, would take a pencil and put it in their right hand and pretend they're writing with it. If you do, you'll notice that you can read the writing. If you put that same pen or pencil in your left hand, you'll see that the writing is upside down. And so you can't read it. So what I did, Hank, based on what my clients, customers, friends, students were telling me, is I bought pens, right-handed pens, pencils, and left-handed pencils. The writing was reversed. And so that's what I would do when I'd give them a pencil. I'd say to you, "Hey, Hank, you want a right-handed pencil?" And you say, "Sure." And then I'd say to you, "Hank, would you like a left-handed pencil?" And you say, "Sure." And then I'd point out the difference. And at least you learn one thing if you work with me. You learn the difference between a right-handed and a left-handed pencil. And to go back to your question, that's sort of when I started using it in a business standpoint. I started to find out from people that they told me for some reason they didn't want pens that leaked. You know, they didn't like that. I don't understand why, but they were kind of annoyed with me. So I said I couldn't do that. I could get more expensive pens, but they were more expensive. So instead I went a different route. I got less expensive pencils. And then instead of long pencils, I wound up getting very small pencils to keep the cost down. And I gave that, but I found out, Hank, and this is a tip for your viewers as well, or your listeners, that how do you know if you have a good giveaway? Let me ask you, for example, do you, in your business, I don't know if I've seen one, do you have a giveaway that you give to clients?
I don't have a physical giveaway that I give to clients, but there's things that I give out that are files that I give to clients. Like if someone wants a file about a certain topic that helps them in their business, I've got several giveaways.
Okay. And what I like about that is if you give away, you know you have a good giveaway if people ask for it. You know, they're asking, Hank, and they do ask, if I want something from you, you say that all the time, you're very generous. You say all the time, ask me for it or send me a note and I'll send it to you. And that's a winner. And it's so easy. I tell people when you want to do marketing research for your home business, it's very simple to do. And I'll put you on the spot a little bit here.
Okay.
But if you work with Hank, I strongly recommend that people work with you. But if you have an idea for your business, you can ask Hank his opinion, and Hank will give you his opinion. You can ask me your opinion as well. But let me ask you, and I'm setting you up for the question, Hank, and putting you on the spot here. Who's a better person to determine whether you have a good giveaway or you have a good thing you're giving away. Who should you ask their opinion of?
People who would benefit from the giveaway.
Okay, even a step further, good. Even a step further, ask your existing clients. In other words, rather than you coming up with an opinion, and I have this all the time, clients come up to me, the business card, is this a good business card? Is this a good giveaway? Is this a good file to give? I say, I'll be glad to give you my opinion, but my opinion means nothing. You know, I'm not your client unless I am your client. A much better person to get their opinion from is people you've done business with. You know, and most of them, you ask them, I use something, Hank, called permission-oriented marketing. Now, I ask you, Hank, could I ask you a question?
Oh, yes.
And most people say yes, you know, 98% of the time, 99% of the time. And once they've given you permission to ask you a question, then I might ask you from a marketing standpoint, Hank, I'd like your opinion if I could. I'm thinking of using two business cards, two different kinds of business cards, A and B, you know. Which do you prefer? And you try to make the choice simple. You try to give them just ask them for one opinion, not 100 opinions. And then if you say, for example, I like card A better, then I might ask you one other question, Hank. And again, asking people who've done business with you, I might ask you this question. I might ask you, instead of asking you, why do you like that better? What's the problem with me asking you that question? Why do you like card A better? Can you see the problem?
Well, it's very subjective and it puts the person on the spot.
In large part, it's also very broad-based. You know, it's very hard. Why, you know, do I want to hurt the person's feeling? Do I want to give the person an honest opinion? It's very, very tough to answer. I find a much easier question to ask Hank is, hey, you've given me an opinion, you like card A better. Hank, could I ask you one more question? Yes. Could you tell me one thing you like better about card A? Then you shut up. And you got to pause, which is hard for me, hard for you perhaps as well. But you got to give them the chance to answer. And people find it much easier to answer one thing rather than, as you said, you know, a very broad-based, subjective kind of question. So again, it's back to the whole premise. And I work with, you know, home businesses, I work with any business on this. Is just constantly, you want information, go back to people who use you, go back to people who know you, as opposed to asking Hank Eder, Blaine Greenfield, whoever you want. I'm glad to give my opinion, but if I've never bought from you, if I'm not your client, what do you really care about what I think? Wouldn't you care about more about people who use you on a regular basis and like you?
Oh, yes. And especially if these are the people that you're working with on a regular basis, you know them, they know you, and their opinion should be important to you.
Yeah, and that's frankly, you know, that's what you care about, their opinion, as opposed to, you know, your own opinion all the time.
Yes, most definitely. Could you give me another example of how you use the platinum rule?
Okay, I'll give an example, Hank, and I believe can be used in our personal lives. And I tell the story of, as you introduced her, I tell the story of Cynthia, my beautiful bride, okay? And Cynthia, I don't know about your wife, Hank, but my wife collects Buddhas, okay? These little big fat, you know, creatures. We have like 37 Buddhas in our house, you know, and Cynthia always goes to a yoga studio or some other place, she sees a Buddha, can she buy it? So a couple of years ago, before Valentine's Day, she comes home and says she saw a Buddha and should she buy it? I said, Cynthia, you have 37 Buddhas. Do we really need a 38th Buddha? You know, it's a big fat Buddha. It was very, very expensive, very, very heavy. And she thought about, no, not really. You know where the story is going. You may have heard it personally, the story. But before that Valentine's Day that year, I went out to the yoga studio, bought the Buddha, killed my bag. It was like 50 pounds, you know, tripping it up the steps. $300. It was the most ridiculous $300 I ever spent for anybody. But I put it in her meditation room. I had her close her eyes, and she opened them up. We even gave the name we gave the Buddha a name, Call the Buddha. And there in our meditation room is Call Buddha. My point being that, to me, even as I tell you the story, Hank, I've told the story a bunch of times, it doesn't make sense. You know, it doesn't seem like a logical gift. It doesn't seem, who would want that Buddha? You know, would you want that Buddha? You know, would you want to call the Buddha?
I wouldn't want Carl Buddha, but...
Right, couldn't pay me. But it was the best gift I think I've ever given because it's what she wanted, you know? And so you give gifts, and we don't do this enough, I don't think. You don't think about what the other person wants. We think about what we like, what's easy for us. Just give it to them, but isn't that a nice thing to do? Can I give you another example? Do you have time?
Yes, yes.
Okay, tell me when we're running up against the clock. But here's another example I think of, Hank. We don't entertain that much, but one of the things I learned about entertaining is that rather than serve what I like, isn't it a nice thing to ask what the people who are entertaining, what they like? So I tell the story, and I think you even know him, my good friend Brian Byro. You've heard the name, is a famous motivational speaker in the Asheville area. Well, not too long ago, he was having us and some other people over his house for dinner, he and his wife Carol. And I'm a little bit of a picky eater, and so they were serving Mexican food, and I'm not a big Mexican food fan. And so what they did, I was so impressed with, I got there, everybody else had Mexican food, they got me a pizza, you know, and I was a happy camper. But isn't that a nice thing to do when you're going to entertain company, when you're going to be with somebody, find out what they like and give it to them, as opposed to guessing or giving them something they don't like. Simple example. It's just, it really worked when they did it for me. It just put such a big smile on my face that they gave me what I like. Can I give you one more example?
Certainly.
Okay, tell me if I don't have time. But I tell this story, Hank. I'll tell maybe two other stories. But my wife is into reflexology. You know what reflexology is?
A foot massage.
Exactly. You massage the feet. And Cynthia does it very well. But the only problem, Hank, is she loves hot water. Okay, and the hotter the water, the better. Okay, and I don't love hot water, you know. And so what Cynthia used to do, you know where I'm going on this, she would give you a foot soak first, and she'd fill the tub with water with some Epsom salt, and put my feet in it, and I was dying. You know, it was like, it was too hot. You know, I didn't like it. And I discussed it with Cynthia, but she didn't get it until I finally said, Cynthia, can I ask you a favor? She said, yes. I said, Cynthia, can I set the temperature for the water? Can I fill the tub with water? And she said, yeah. And now she lets me fill it. And it's the temperature I like as opposed to the temperature she likes, you know? One more example. You got me on a roll, Hank.
But before you do, I just want to add, maybe she was just really trying to hold your feet to the fire.
Okay, that's a good one. I hadn't thought of that, Hank, but they're absolutely right. But I don't think I'd be a very good one. But I don't think I have to remember that. I don't think I'd go back. I'd go back to that reflexology expert. Let me ask you this: do you like massages?
Oh yes, definitely.
Okay. I love full body massages. I love them. I have them regularly. The only problem, Hank, I don't know if you ever had this, but do you ever notice when you go to a massage therapist, they play music usually?
Yes.
And it's usually their choice of music. And it's usually, I love it, it's usually a music from the Amazon rainforest or something. You know, it's always this strange music.
Yeah, shakuhachi flutes and those kinds of...
That's it, Hank. And sometimes you even hear water cascading down the mountains, you know. And the only thing about that, Hank, I have a problem with it because all it does is makes me want to pee, you know. I'm telling you, kid you not, it makes no sense to me. Why should they play this music, which I hate? So instead, what one massage therapist did for me, I loved it, was she let me bring in my own music. So I bring remember when they had something called CDs? You know, there was actually something called CDs. And so she let me bring in a CD, and I got to hear the music I wanted to hear. And you know, of course, what I listened to, you know, a song you played for me, recorded for me once, Happy Together, arguably the greatest rock song of all time. And I listen to that music and I'm happy. Give people what they want. Hank, I'm a little concerned. Are we up running against the clock?
No, we're doing fine. I'll let you know.
You'll edit me out. But anyway, so in all these different situations, and if you notice, I'm trying to give you business examples that you can use it in businesses, you can use it in home businesses, you can use it in your personal lives as well. Just constantly, Platinum Rule says, ask people what they want, as opposed to you giving them what you think they want. I tell the other example, a friend of mine years ago gave me flying lessons. And have you ever flown in a small plane?
I've been in them, but I've never actually flown one.
Anyway, do you like being in a small plane?
It's not my favorite.
Exactly. I hate it, small plane. So he gives me this gift, Hank. He thinks it's the greatest gift in the world, flying lessons, you know. And for a year, I don't get it. I don't even go up for it. I didn't want to take it. So finally, after a year, I got up in a plane. I took one flying lesson. I survived. I'm here now. But I learned from that too. I said, why do you give that as a gift to somebody if that's not what they want? He was a pilot, so he loved it. He thought it was the greatest gift in the world. I hate small planes. I hate flying. Why give that to somebody? Ask people what they want, or ask their spouse, significant other, son, daughter, whatever. Do your research and find out what they want, and then give it to them and make them a happy camper. And that's, I think, what we should be doing in business all the time. Giving people what they want, and if they're happy. I have another belief, Hank, especially with a home business, that I contend we do business with somebody for two reasons, one of two reasons. One, because they meet our needs, so they solve our problem. You help me with the mailing, you help me with the direct mail piece I'm doing, you help me with the brochure, the flyer, the press release. You're great at that. Okay, you really are.
Well, thank you, thank you.
But we also do business with people for another reason. And we do business with the second reason is because we like the person. And if you combine the two reasons, they're going to be a customer of yours for life, And I believe this in terms of, I do business with a couple people and I call them the best. I just love doing business with them. And I never even compare the competition. I never look at price. I don't consider anybody else. Because this person is the absolute best. Why would I go elsewhere if they meet my needs? So I can then see more than price. If I like you and I'm happy with you, and I think you're a testament of this, that many of your clients, which is really phenomenal, stay with you for years. They don't leave you, and they don't every week shop the competition trying to get a better deal because you meet their needs and they like doing business with you.
Right, we become friends in addition to being clients.
Yeah, you do business with your friends as opposed to your clients, and you like them. You like them to become your friends.
Well, where do we get more information about the Platinum Rule or other examples, and how do people get in touch with you?
Well, thanks for asking, Hank. Two things. One, if anybody would be interested, I don't know if you've seen it. I think maybe you have, but I have a, just like you, I have a video, a very short video, and I like what you said earlier. I'll take your advice. And I'll offer any listener a copy of the presentation I've done on it. It's only about 6.5 minutes, a YouTube clip, but I'm more than glad to send anybody a copy of that if they'd like. You mentioned the best way to reach me is you can reach me through Facebook at Blaine, B-L-A-I-N-E, Greenfield. Also, Hank, my email address is bginbc@aol.com. That's bginbc@aol.com. And if you write me, I'd be more than glad to send you this clip of the Platinum Rule. I'd also be glad to put you on my mailing list. The only thing, Hank, can I make one more suggestion?
Certainly.
Okay, because again, I don't want to get the cut sign. But here's something else, Hank, I tell especially home business folks to do. That if you write me, or if you write Hank, if you write anything else, anybody else, put something compelling in the subject line. Tell people what you want in the subject line. As opposed to, and I learned this years ago when I would put FYI in the subject line. People would say, what's that all about?
That's spam. That's spam.
Exactly, and isn't it true? We talked at a meeting you ran a couple of weeks ago, you put word free is not a good thing to put because it's in the spam folder. But instead, you want me to do something, just say, hey, Blaine, please send Platinum Rule video, or Blaine, put me on your mailing list. Tell me what you want me to do and make it easy to read just in the subject line. It's very easy for me to respond as opposed to have to look for your email.
Very, very good. Well, thank you for being here with me today. This was a pleasure.
Well, as always, Hank, pleasure with me. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, thanks for tuning in with us today. Before I sign off, I'd like to say there are some great resources available for people who run home businesses, including an online community of like-minded home business entrepreneurs. If you want to learn more, please drop me an email at hank@hankeder.com. And please join us again next week. We're back every Friday at 10 a.m. here on WPVM LP, Asheville 103.7, and on the web globally at WPVMFM.org. Here's wishing all of you a fabulous day of home business success.